Hello and welcome to the Be Formless Flow Driven CEO podcast, where we are reshaping life, leadership and business from the inside out. It's happy Friday for me and happy Thursday night vibes for Logan.
Yeah, not yet Friday for me.
Welcome to the show, Logan.
Thank you. It's so great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Logan, I'm going to let you pronounce your surname. I did try it then and I'm not sure if I landed it. So can you please?
No problem. It's Yonavjak.
Yonavjak. There you go. I got it after. Whenever you hear somebody say a word and then I feel like I can then just say it if I get stuck on it. Does that ever happen to you?
I have this funny example from, it wasn't that late it was like I was like 7 or 8 and the word chaos, I had only seen it written and I thought it was chaos for the longest time. And I still laugh about that because I just had not heard a lot of people actually say it. So I still chuckle about that.
Yeah, I do. I'm going to chuckle about that too, Charles.
Charles.
Yeah, it's Charles. It's hard to imagine. Anyway, how's your week been, Logan?
It's been, I was just telling you earlier, it's been actually an amazing day. A lot has come together. Some potential clients and partners, like I've had some just extraordinary conversations today. But earlier this week, I was feeling a little down about things. There was just like so much up in the air. So yeah, just like starting a company, lots of ups and downs.
Yeah, all the highs and the lows and in betweens. And I think that's what's so great about getting people like yourself on the pod to talk about it. So it's a big shout out to all the listeners. Hello, everybody, because we've got a lot of founders, a lot of, budding entrepreneurs out there, as well as leaders. And I think they always get a lot out of these conversations. So, big shout out to all the listeners, and please share, comment on the pod. And I'm sure there'll be lots that resonate with you today based on what Logan and I are going to discuss. So Logan, let's get into it. Let's start with, you have a beautiful little daughter. She's did you say 2.5 or 2 3/4?
2 1/4.
2 1/4, that's right. Little Erica. So she sounds like she keeps you on your toes.
Especially yes. It's like I'm doing a startup and a startup,
It's impressive. I mean, I've got Marley Bob, excuse me, at 2.5, and half the time he's running around the house and he's got the ball and it's like a battle between, Marley Bob, I've got to do a meeting or I've got to do this.
I know, and they just don't understand.
They don't. And you can't tell them off because there's no point. They're not going to get it. Anywho. So Logan, let's get into it. You're the co-founder and CEO of Readiness Engine. How long ago did you start the business?
Well, I was conceptualizing it around January 2025 and then formalized the company in May 2025. So a little over a year, I would say.
How cool. And it's an AI-informed leadership intelligence platform that helps investors, boards, and executive teams make better people decisions by measuring the leadership capacity traditional due diligence quite often overlooks. An important inflection point emerged for you after nearly 2 decades allocating capital across institutions, including the Yale Investments Office. Logan, you realized that the greatest risk wasn't the investment itself, it was whether the people behind it had the capacity to navigate uncertainty and grow into what the opportunity demanded. And then when you discovered the existing tools couldn't answer that question, so you thought it's time to go out and build what I think can. Today, Logan, you're helping organizations look beyond the résumés and reputation to understand the human capacity that drives long-term success. Oh my God, those traditional résumés. I do want to talk to you about that throughout this. At the heart and soul of your work is a belief that every significant investment is ultimately an investment in people. I could not agree more. When we recognize the human capacity, not just past performance, we make wiser decisions for better business leadership and the future. Tell us a bit about your journey. You've had all this experience previously. Did you hit a crossroad also in terms of it was time, that you wanted to go out on your own, or was there something that forced you, or you just decided, I've got this idea, I need to run with it?
Yeah. I mean, I think I came to entrepreneurship in my mid-30s, I would say. I mean, before that, I was really interested in, I've always been interested in this, but I was really interested in working for a mid-sized to larger investment firm that was doing capital allocation. And I like to say I'm in the field of impact investing. That's a broad term, but it just really means investing for the good of people and society and also the environment alongside financial return. So I think as I went along, I was very drawn to innovative people and leadership. And then I realized that most of the innovation writ large was happening at the early stages of company development. So it was hard to affect a lot of change when you were at bigger organizations. And I just got more enamored with entrepreneurship as I went. And then, this is my second company. My first company was with three other founders, and it was more of a boutique investment banking group. So very different business model. But then all along the way, I've been fascinated with people since a young age. And I did want to become a psychotherapist in high school. So I was, I had a mentor, a family friend who was sort of mentoring me in Jungian psychology. And like, I really seriously considered it. And then I got really involved with the environmental movement and felt that my time was better spent at the time working on the climate crisis and issues that were more related to conserving our natural resources. So that's a little bit of like where I come from. And then the leadership assessment space, I've always found fascinating too, because I love taking leadership assessments. I'm like, oh,
Oh,
I
do
want to
you?
learn more.
What's your favorite?
Yeah.
What's your favorite?
Well, now it's ours,
Yeah, I was
but
about to say.
now it's ours. I think I mean, I always was drawn to the Myers-Briggs because of the Jungian underpinnings. Carl Jung is like he's kind of the father of psychotherapy in many ways. But I was just like loved typing people and thinking about the applications of it. But I realized that not many people in the investing world and even in my MBA program really thought about leadership very deeply. Like there was a lot of let's focus on the business model, the product, the market context, but not so much around the people, which when you think about early stage investing in particular or alternatives, you're mostly investing in the team. As the company grows, it's more about the business model and traction, but this team is still so much of the equation. And just there's a disparity there. So a
Yeah,
lack of focus. Yeah.
yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. So, well, tell me a little bit about then the readiness engine. So you said you came up with it you started it in 2025, officially created the company in May of 2025. The readiness engine as such, is it a methodology? Like, obviously, it's an AI native company. You've seen all these challenges along the way, and I agree with you around the leadership point. It is very much what I see is also the same as in terms of that focus on the profit or all the product, the MVP, all of that. And yet at the end of the day, the founder, the leader plays a huge part of how that all comes together. And I talk a lot about the identity or the story and connecting it all together. And I think sometimes some of the worst leaders are the people that come up with the business idea because they've never had any leadership training or anything you know what I mean? So Readiness Engine, the name in itself, what are you preparing people for? What's the methodology behind it?
Yeah. Well, and I can't, my co-founder, who's he's a transpersonal psychologist, which is all about the theory and methodology of self-actualization. So transpersonal psychology is just a type of psychology and transpersonal. So it's like, how do you evolve kind of
Yes.
past the ego? And I knew him, his name's Benjamin Whitehurst. I've known him for about 5 years. And I sort of threw this idea at him when he was finishing his MBA program. And he was like, we could develop something based on adult developmental theory, which is a body of psychology. And he
Yeah.
was like, I wasn't aware of this type of psychology before we talked about it. So really, this is a combination of my instinct that there was a business idea and his background to really ground the methodology. And so it's based on 50 years of research, and what makes it applicable to today and scalable and lower cost is AI. So that's why we brought AI into the fold. It's not that we just want to have AI because it's sexy and it's the new thing. It's really, in the past, developmental psychologists have had a hard time disseminating this research because it requires a lot of sitting down and hand scoring people's transcript data. When someone's speaking, you're looking at the structure of their thought and how they hold perspective That's one of the main things we look at. And to do that, you needed individuals who had experience scoring these transcripts. So now with AI, we've trained AI to do it.
Amazing. Yeah, it's incredible because I think about self-actualization, and I mentioned to you a few weeks ago when we were chatting pre-show, pod, and I did a 6-month self-actualization course myself, and it's quite fascinating because when you mention the word self-actualization for business and leaders, it can potentially in some aspects be considered a bit woo, like what are you talking about self-actualization? And what I realized when I was doing the course and then working with clients as part of it was, even for myself, is that you have to have your foundations in order first in terms of who you are, what you are, like what makes you tick from the inside to then be able to move to set sail, if you like. There's a boat analogy that we studied through the Center for
Yeah.
Human Potential with Scott Barry Kaufman. In terms of self-actualization and obviously having a psychologist in this space, it's not something that is very, like, I guess, what's the word I'm looking for here? That you don't hear a lot about self-actualization in leadership. And so
Yeah,
especially
that's true.
in the space that you're talking about and the space you're playing in, and yet so much of it is required and to have that ability to be self-actualized and to have the foundations in place to then set sail. Like, what do
Hmm.
you see in terms of, do you think this is a new form of leadership? Do you think this is something that is not yet mainstream? That was the word I was looking for. Yeah.
The way I've come to understand it is that there's this, what developmental psychology illuminates is patterns in adult development. And so there's stages of development of how adults evolve. And that has to do to, in large degree, to how many perspectives one can hold objectively and whether one can think paradoxically and just be able to bring in like multiple frameworks to make decisions. And so that's what we think about the visionary leadership that we've all experienced is somebody who's just like, we almost think about them as up in the clouds sometimes, or they
Yeah.
can be interesting spiritual leaders who just, they seem to see more than most people and they're able to comprehend and kind of hold objectively all these different perspectives. Whereas in the beginning stages of development, you're more black and white thinker. So you see things as more like this or that. But I think what I have, just to kind of simplify, at least my perspective, is that most corporations sit in a developmental band themselves. So they're not talking about self-actualization because they themselves are not, as a culture, is not really working towards self-actualization. They're working towards profit. And that keeps them in a certain developmental band. And it's focused on efficiency and productivity. And there's the goals of those
All the
organizations
doing.
are, yeah. And so they don't really see the higher levels of consciousness. I'll even use that word because that's really not what they're focused on. And when people start to evolve, they want to leave because they can't stand the culture anymore. And so they're really like developing out of, and then they try to do their own thing or they go be entrepreneurs or, there's all these like follow on effects. So I think that's a little bit of an explanation of why I don't think it's talked about in most mainstream leadership development.
But yet it's so required. Like, don't you think in this like world we're living in right now, like
Yeah.
it is changing. People are done with, like, let's talk about the traditional resume, like I called out earlier, in terms of like there's so many barriers to being your most self-actualized best self in terms of flourishing, because we're stuck in these old systems and these old models and these old development programs that are just
Yeah.
not conducive to where the world is right now. And it blows my mind because it's like we aren't bringing out the best in the people. Like you talked about illuminating. It's true. And then I think this is why so many people are in roles or in business or even as founders or CEOs and like this, because they're just like, they're not at their best. They're not self-actualized. And actually if you can understand what in of the foundations aren't actually clicking or working, to then be able to get to the place you need to get to, you're always going to be stuck in I'll use the
And
boat
people
again.
do. They get stuck for decades. We all know
Yeah,
people who are just in a very fixed developmental mind or fixed mindset that kind of keeps them at a certain level of development. They can age 20 years, but they're still kind of the same person. I mean, I
yeah,
know people like that, and it's shocking, but it's true. Whereas if you get coaching or if you start focusing on it and you do have a growth mindset, there are ways you can grow into that. And I think what's happening is there's not a shared vocabulary or focus on this in mainstream society. So often it's just seen as like navel gazing or sometimes even new age, or just like people at lower levels of development or earlier stages of development tend to think about it as like, this is a waste of time. I don't understand the point of this. It's not concrete. It's not, what's the tangibility of it? And so they're speaking literally different language than people at different like later stages of development.
yeah. It's a good point. So, the Readiness Engine. Tell us then, like you said, you have your good days, your bad days as a founder and entrepreneur. You are doing something like I am. You're trailblazing something that is different to the status quo, we feel like. How do you go about that? Because I'm sure you get like a lot of knockbacks, no, not for us. And then, and it does, it wears you down. And I'd love to
Yeah,
get
it
your thoughts
does.
on this, because as a founder, co-founder, you have to be, it's like, yes, you have to pivot at times because something's not working or something's not like moving the business along. But there's also times where I think you have to hold your ground and go, you know what? We have to stick to this because we will attract the right clients. The clients that are saying no, they're not the right fit for these reasons, because they're at a lower developmental level, for example, like to use your own words. How do
Trying
you,
to say earlier, I realized I shouldn't say lower because it's not bad,
no,
like being lower.
yeah.
It's just earlier stages. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So how do you work through that? Like, and then how are you approaching with the Readiness Engine? Like, how are you approaching clients in a way that is true to the purpose, the mission that you're on of the business, without almost paring it back to fit a mold that doesn't fit the new mold going forward? Does that make sense? What I'm asking?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think there's an art to knowing when to stick with something. What is it? Knowing to hold them, fold them, and walk away. There's some famous song that talks about that. But anyway, I mean, I think one of the first things is I've gotten actually some training recently. So I hired a sales coach because I came into this I'm a good relationship manager, and I've sold a lot of investment products. Like I've helped move, like I put in my bio, I've helped move hundreds of millions, and I've personally fundraised about 100 million. And so, I've gone out to institutional investors and I've been the relationship manager, and I've done that. So I was like, oh, this is going to be not easy, but it'll be like more my natural skill set. And there's a process in sales that I'm learning about, really removing ambiguity in a conversation so you know exactly what problem you're solving for someone.
Yeah.
And the words that they're using to describe that problem, you have to then use language that matches that so it lights up the part of their brain that's like, oh yeah, that's what I need. And I think it's like, I started out with the wrong customer base. So I didn't hear a lot of hair on fire need. So I had to move on from the venture capital space. And then now it's been a bit of like, how do I really listen deeply to what this person's struggling with and hear them articulate what their need is, and then like see if I actually can help them solve their problem. So that's just been, honestly, it's been one of the hardest things I've done professionally, is just like, just I don't know how to put it. It's like whittling down the conversation so you
Hey,
can
I
arrive
agree.
there.
I agree, because you've gone from, like you say, you've done all these deals, like you've like multi-million dollar deals, and like relationship manager,
I like
like,
deals. I think it's
yeah,
fun to structure
yeah.
deals,
So you think that, like, because transferable skills are great, right? And I had the same challenge as well. I've worked with some of Australia's biggest clients and some global clients in the world, and here, big contractual clients, like 5 million plus, retainers and like things like that, plus building a business to the size I built it. And yet here, like you go into then your own business, and I hate the term small business because I just think it's so like the word small, it just doesn't like, it's like, there's got to be a better term for that too, right?
Emerging
Emerging.
enterprise.
Yeah, do you
Yeah.
know, it's something like that. It's like resume. I hate that word too. And I know hate's a strong word. However, I just think that it's a different form, and it's like almost it messes with your ego in a way because you're like, oh, am I just really shit at this? Like, what's wrong with me? And you go into, and like as a woman, like I'm sure you're like, I can't, I used to be able to do this. What's happened to me? And you feel like you've failed and all these things start going on in your head. It's just a
Yeah, I
new
don't think
art.
I've ever been rejected. The amount of times I've been rejected per unit of time this last year is like higher than I've ever. It's like I've been like, I've had rejections, whether they're dating or jobs, a few times. I will say a few times because it hasn't happened all that much, but like to be told no as much as because you're talking to a lot of people when you're in sales, and it's just like, wow. Yeah. Some days I've just had to take a step back and be like, am I just a terrible salesperson?
Yeah. Yeah, it messes with your confidence. Like I was saying to you
Yeah.
pre-show, like, my accountant said to me the other week, B, and I'm like, don't even I actually just jumped on it. Don't even get me started. Like,
Yeah.
I think this is part of being an entrepreneur. And I saw this great quote the other day, and it was like, for the first 3 years of rejection or just no, 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 no's, just remember that in a month you can make up 3 years worth of like,
Yeah. No, and that's the thing. It's like, I've used the analogy of mirages before. Like, I feel like I'm kind of chasing mirages, and there's a little bit of like slight delusional thing. I feel like I'm a little bit, what is the word, dehydrated in the desert, and I'm sort of like seeing possibility, but I don't know if it's totally real. So,
yeah, is it just something that, so tell us a little bit about, like, I come to you because I want to work with you or partner with you. I'm curious or intrigued about the Readiness Engine. How does it work? Like, what happens from the moment I like interact with you,
yeah.
or the Readiness
Well,
Engine, I
there's
should say?
two ways that we work with. I mean, we can do individual assessments, and then we can get transcript data. Like, we could take all of your podcasts and do the same analysis. And we can do a team analysis, like either with assessments or transcript data. And that's what really got me excited, is the transcript data piece, because we're all sitting on so much of it now. And so
Yeah.
we don't have to have people sit down and necessarily take an assessment, but they also can. And then we turn around the analysis in 5 to 7 business days. It's either a report, so you get a report and it's either geared towards you or whoever asked for it, or it's a team analysis. And then my co-founder tends to do the debriefs, which really lands it for people, but you don't need a debrief. Like, you can just use the results. And then we do trainings for coaches to understand how to read the analytics. We can teach teams how to read it. So there's multiple ways of working with us, but how we acquire the data is either through a 45-minute one-way video assessment or transcript data.
Yeah, okay. And so when you get the results, if we come right back to this self-actualization psychology piece, what do the results like result in? For example, I'm a leader, I do the assessment with you, I get the assessment. How does that then transpire? I mean, obviously you work with coaches, etc. But like, does it call out where you're at in your evolution, your development, and what phase you're at, and the areas that you need to work on, or the areas that are open for, you know, development as such? Like, how does that bit work?
Yeah, so our goal is to present information in a way that's very, where someone can really accept it, because it's not supposed to be
Yeah.
antagonistic in any way.
No.
It's very important to have people feel psychologically safe when they're reading something. And so we've spent a lot of time like on the language and wording so that people don't get defensive, or they can still get defensive, but we're trying not to. And then we focus people on like three main areas of like based on their results, like three main areas to work on. And that's because, you can only work on so many things at once. And so there's examples. So for instance, we helped a founder, we did an evaluation of a CEO of an early stage startup, and he scored really high. We have 6 constructs, and one of them is relational intelligence. So like how well do you empathize with others and relate to other human beings? He scored really high there, but then his purposeful agility, which is ability to pivot and make decisions quickly, that was lower. And so we had a couple different recommendations for him at 6, 12, and 18 months and then deeper questions to ask him, but also ways that he could practice making harder decisions.
Yeah.
And then a recommendation to actually bring on a COO that could help him complement his skill set to be able to make decisions more quickly and swiftly. So he had a harmony bias, is what we like to call it. He liked taking in information and listening to his team, but he didn't want to make any hard decisions.
Yeah,
Often.
okay, there you go. It's really interesting, isn't it? Because it's very practical, and I'm keen to ask a question around what are you seeing with founders and CEOs? Like, what are you seeing a lot of common patterns that are coming out? I mean, obviously AI is pulling out the patterns. What are you seeing as the biggest challenges and opportunities from a pattern perspective for CEOs and founders right now? It's not an easy environment to be building a business in. Like, there's a lot happening in the world, and then there's ego that comes into play as well.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that all the investors we've talked to, if I were to poll them, I've talked to about 150 investors just for this company, but I have a lot of investor contacts. But the top thing that they all want to evaluate, if they do evaluate people analytics, is coachability. So they want to know that someone's coachable. That is a bit of a precursor to everything else. Like, it's hard to work on self-actualization if you're not very coachable.
Yeah.
And what does that mean? It's a spectrum of like, it's all about me and my identity, and I'm going to defend that, all the way to I adapt to the situation I'm in, and I'm pretty flexible in how I identify with the system I'm in.
Yeah. It's really interesting you bring that up, actually, that identity, and there's still this desire's the wrong word, actually. There's still just this wanting to still fit into this mold, this existing environment, because if you step out of it, you're putting yourself out there, and that's scary, and that's also like change and new, and like everyone else is just following the status quo. And yet we need more founders, more CEOs, more leaders that are living their true authentic self. And so I'm really big on, like, self-actualization is not something that can just happen overnight. It's an evolution. It's almost like something needs to unravel for you to then go, what's going on in here? What's
Yeah.
happening inside of me that I need to listen to? And yet we just have this tendency to ignore, and then until it starts screaming at you. And this is what I, train and work with people on in terms of inside out. Like, what is the inside telling you? What is your soul telling you? And there's practical ways to be able to listen to that as well, because this busy hustle, continue to just always do it the way we've done it, it's not allowing us any space to evolve either.
Yeah. No, most people don't give themselves the time to listen, which is, I think, you have to develop that channel of communication with yourself. That's a that's a pretty important piece. And some of the work that is being done is just getting people to like learn how to listen to what their internal self is telling them. But I also think you brought up something important, which is this work isn't linear. Like, we talk about stages, but within that, there are sometimes, for instance, someone will grow up in a very conservative religious household, and then they'll completely go 180 and become an atheist. And so there's like these ways in which people are rectifying paradox. That doesn't mean that that's a linear like experience, but overall there are stages of development if you look at the big picture. So sometimes there's regressions or you see a pattern from a different perspective. So it's complex, but there are developmental patterns you can look at and measure. So
Yeah, I agree. Nothing's linear. I've got a couple of final questions for you, Logan. When you booked in for the pod and I asked you what's one unique insight or lived experience you'd like to share when it comes to life, leadership or business, and you talked about this developing greater resilience within myself to hold complexity. We've talked about the sales piece and, going from an investment professional to then a founder CEO and all the growth and edges that go with that. I'm a big believer in anti-fragility. So it's, we're always going to have moments of fragility. Things don't work the way we want to, or some form of adversity happens, and then we find a way to bounce back, which is obviously resilience. Rather than just going back and forth between fragility and resilience, is also like that post-traumatic growth or that growth perspective, and that's like how do you bounce forward? Tell us a little bit about you've called it out, developing greater resilience within myself to hold complexity. It was really fascinating when I read this, holding complexity, because I'm always like, aren't you meant to release complexity? Like there's complexity is always going to be there, but like it's an interesting spin on, what did you mean by that?
well, I mean, I think we're just in an era. I think when I look at this, maybe as tangible example as this was a couple months ago, but my co-founder is very fluent with AI and he's always working on different tools and different systems and processes, and it's kind of dizzying, but I've become pretty fluent myself, and I needed it to do some marketing output, and it gave me this long, like kind of, I wouldn't call it AI slop, but it had so much content that it was overwhelming to me.
Yeah.
And I just sat there and I was like, this is kind of the world we're in. Like if I want to be a CEO and I don't have a lot of, I'm early in the business, so I don't have a lot of people to offload this to, like I'm going to have to accept that I just have to like incorporate all these different pieces, and this is just another layer of complexity that I'm working with. And some of my go-tos in the past have been like, I have a council of people I'll sort of talk to about different problems I'm having. And I've also learned to like know what they're going to say. Not that they're just in my head, but I've kind of like gotten enough of a sense of what perspectives I need when I'm in a bad place to not necessarily have to call them or draw on them anymore, where I just like allow myself to, I understand what it feels like to come to the brink in myself. And then I just like let it settle and I sort of know my process. And I think I just have it's like weight training. I do functional fitness work, and it's that last rep where you're like, I can't do another one, but that's how the muscle grows. Like
Yes, totally.
I can really
Yeah.
feel that edge in myself. And I don't think there've only been a few instances in my life where I brought myself to that edge. And I'm not necessarily advocating like going to burnout, but I think there's this art of knowing like when you're at that edge and when it's good uncomfortable and when it's like toxic uncomfortable.
Yeah, it's called challenge skills balance, actually. It's like, there's this middle piece around hitting your flow state, and you can be too much in the challenge space where it's overwhelming, you're stressed out, like you're in survival, or you can drop down into the apathy, boredom, where you're not being challenged enough. So how do you get
Yeah.
into that middle part of what is called the challenge skills balance that Mahali
Okay.
Csikszentmihalyi created? Yeah, I can share some great tools around that with you. Last question. In terms of female founder, like you would have seen this in your investment days as well. And female founders, there's a lot of us out there. There's also not a lot of us out there, and also women who are seeking funding. I've interviewed a lot of VCs also on my podcast. And what do you see as the biggest, as a female founder? What do you see as the biggest, if we come back to complexity and challenge, what do you see as the biggest challenge for you in terms of, as being a female, building a business, scaling it, or do you not? Like, do you just see you don't see that as anything that's in the way?
No, I mean, I definitely think there's biological differences between men and women. And one of the things I do think about this from time to time is like, there's a different way that and these are broad strokes, it's not every man or every woman, but it's like, I think women tend to relate differently and have, there's a relational aspect they bring to business that
Yes.
sometimes men
Yes.
there's a more straightforward, like linear experience that men are having with biz. They're more like information sharing rather than like adding too much of the relational aspects. That's just, again, broad strokes difference. And I also feel like the workplace is engineered around people with more testosterone. So like there's a lot more like drive and sort of like not aggression in a bad way all the time, but there's just more of a linear drive.
Hunting. I just think of hunting. The word hunting comes up.
Hunting, yeah, it's like
talking about that, like hunt. Like
it's very cutting and it's like direct. And I like that. I like having the balance of that. And I think it's great to have diverse. That's why diversity is so valuable. But as a woman founder, I think it's been hard, for instance, in sales where like you're supposed to be hitting like these quotas in a way of like growing the business quickly and all the stuff. And it's like, but my nature is more the relational side of it. So it's how do you bring together these two ways of being, which I can carry? But yeah, I don't know. I have noticed a difference in approach. Yeah.
I agree. And it's also for me, it's relationship building. It's like I'm in it for the long term. I'm not in it for the quick hits. Like I build relationships with my clients, my podcast guests. It's not just you're on, you're off sort of thing, and that's it. And I've always been like that. And I think that's just the empathy and there's something that it comes down to relational. And my only piece of advice to you on that is that, yes, you need to hit sales and all of that. It's just more, how do you do it in a way that's effortless, less versus efforting in terms of staying true to who you truly are. Because I find I have to remind myself of that also at times when I'm like, because I know if I'm pushing and going, I need this sale or I need this revenue coming in. I'm looking at my pipeline. I'm not my best self. I'm someone who is trying to force a sale, and it's obvious. Like I'm not.
It's perceived differently by men too. I think that if women are pushy in the same way, like I've played with this myself. It's just a lived experience. Like if I'm super direct and pushy, it doesn't come across well. Like so I think there are these just ways in which people are reacting to each other somewhat based on gender, but not always,
Yeah.
So I think it's a good thing to explore and just be open about. I don't like, again, I try not to have broad generalizations, but it is an experience that I've had, like those two things I said. It's just kind of how it is. I think it's the difference between lead generation and partnership development and closing. Like the experience of those two things being in a sales role, it's like I love the beginning phases and the sort of like getting someone excited. And then when I have to like go in for the kill, that's a little bit more, I feel like, of a masculine experience.
I agree. And I think there's a different way to it. So I'm going to continue to pursue it because
Yeah. No, I mean, I think it's good for women to be in sales for sure, but
yeah, absolutely. So tell us just quickly, what's next for the Readiness Engine? What's happening next? You've obviously, the business is only it's just over a year young. What's happening next?
Well, we're really excited about our coaching network that we're building. So one of the ways we're scaling is teaching coaches who are excited about developmental psychology to embed our tool in their client work. And so we kicked off today a monthly membership program, and we have a certification training we're building. And then we're working with a lot of like big data where I'm building some partnerships with folks who like really know how to work with big data. And I'm excited to just bring that into the fold and show that people analytics is like a meaty area of analytics. Yeah. So
absolutely investing in people. And then last but not least, if you could give one tip to any of the female founders out there or budding entrepreneurs, like you've got a 2.5-year-old, you got the juggle, it's all, like it's like you say, you've got 2 startups on the go. So if we put that lens over the top of it, what would be your tip to them in terms of staying sane?
Well, I think working on resilience, like personal resilience, just how do you build those systems around yourself, whether it's a strong partner that can help, like as in my husband's watching my daughter right now, whether it's like people you can call when like that truly you can share what's going on with you, whether it's a meditation practice, like really invest in understanding what's going to get you back to baseline when your nervous system is out of whack. Like I think most people just don't invest enough time understanding their personal like configuration enough to know what to do with stress. So
Yeah, I agree. It's a good call out. Oh my gosh, Logan, great conversation. Thank you so much.
it was great to yeah.
Thank you. How do we find out more about the Readiness Engine? How do we find out about more about you and your co-founder?
So we're on LinkedIn, Readiness Engine. You can also follow me, Logan Yonavjak, and readinessengine.io, and send me an email also, logan@founderr.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Enjoy your Thursday evening. And yeah, I'm wishing you utmost success. I'll have to get you back on, I don't know, in 6 months' time or so and
I'd love
see
that.
where everything's headed. So thank you, Logan.
All right. Thank you so much.
Take care. Thanks.